And that's in the situation that one of the family members borrowed money off my house.
The fall from grace was as brutal as any punch Evander Holyfield had ever taken in the ring. After earning over $230 million during one of the most illustrious careers in boxing history, the four-time heavyweight champion found himself standing in a Fayette County, Georgia courtroom in 2008, facing the very real possibility of jail time. Not for any crime he'd committed in the traditional sense, but for something that had become all too common among boxing's greatest warriors: complete financial collapse. The real deal had become a cautionary tale, and what transpired in the years following his retirement would shock even those familiar with the sport's long history of fallen champions. The legal notice that ran in the Fayette Daily News on that Wednesday in June 2008 was brief and devastating. Holyfield's estate would be auctioned off at public outcry to the highest bidder for cash at the Fayette County Courthouse on July 1st. The 54,000-square-foot mansion, located on a street, ironically named Evander Holyfield Highway, was about to be taken from him. The home had 109 rooms, including 17 bathrooms, 3 kitchens, and a bowling alley. Washington Mutual Bank was demanding full repayment of a $10 million loan, and Holyfield had defaulted. But the mansion was only the beginning of the nightmare that was unfolding. The property itself was a monument to excess, sitting on 235 acres of prime Georgia real estate. When Holyfield commissioned its construction, he didn't ask for a big house. In fact, as he would later admit in interviews, he didn't even really understand what huge meant in terms of residential construction. "I didn't know what huge was. My whole thing is that they start building it and I got all this money," Holyfield confessed to Vlad TV in 2023. The construction crews simply started working, and nobody in Holyfield's family thought to check the scope or the ongoing costs because the champion had seemingly unlimited funds at the time. The result was the largest single-family home in Georgia. To put the sheer size in perspective, the mansion was bigger than 11 basketball courts and nearly as large as a standard football field. The amenities read like a fantasy land: indoor and outdoor pools, a boxing gym, a baseball field, a bowling alley, and a 135-seat movie theater. Everything a champion could want. Everything that would eventually drain every penny he'd ever earned. The maintenance costs alone told the story of a man in over his head. The estate required $1 million per year just for upkeep and taxes. The electricity bill for December 2002 was $17,000, largely because of an elaborate Christmas light display that turned the property into a glowing spectacle. Court records from a 2003 child support case revealed that Holyfield's gross monthly income at that time was $604,000. Even with that enormous cash flow, maintaining the mansion was eating through his resources at an alarming rate. And as his earning power declined, following a series of disappointing fights, the mathematics of financial survival became impossible. But the mansion, as devastating as its loss would be, represented only one piece of Holyfield's financial catastrophe. The child support obligations painted an even more complex picture of how a fortune could evaporate. Holyfield had fathered 11 children with 6 different women. In some accounts, the number was reported as 12. Regardless of the exact figure, the child support payments were crushing. At one point, these obligations reached approximately $500,000 annually for the 9 children who didn't live with him. The case that brought Holyfield into that Georgia courtroom in 2008 involved Toy Irvin, a former flight attendant and the mother of Holyfield's 10-year-old son. Irvin had initially been awarded $2,000 per month in child support, but after losing her job when airlines downsized following the September 11th attacks, she returned to court seeking an increase. In 2003, Fayette County jury increased the payment to $3,000 per month after hearing evidence of Holyfield's then substantial income versus Irvin's meager earnings of less than $20,600 monthly. But by 2008, Holyfield's handlers allegedly told Irvin that the boxer would no longer be able to make the $3,000 monthly payments. When she filed a petition for contempt, her attorney, Randy Kessler, expressed concern that there were likely other mothers not being paid. "My concern is there may be a lot of other mothers not getting paid, and I would like my client to be at the front of the line," Kessler stated. He requested that a judge jail Holyfield if payment wasn't forthcoming, emphasizing the absurdity of the situation. This is such a small amount given the scope of what he has. If Evander Holyfield can get away with it, anybody can. There are guys making $15,000 a year who go to jail for missing a $100 payment. The child support debts continued to mount. By 2012, reports indicated that Holyfield owed $327,858.36 in child support, with the Georgia Department of Human Services attempting to collect for months. In one particularly staggering case, Holyfield was ordered by a California court in 2000 to pay just over $19,270 per month for his daughter. He had allegedly not financially supported her since April 2010. The state requested a judge's order to jail Holyfield and garnish his wages until the debts were satisfied. His driver's license faced suspension if he couldn't come up with the money. Beyond the mansion and the child support, there was a cascade of failed business ventures that accelerated Holyfield's financial demise. In 1999, the same year he lost the heavyweight title for what would be the final time to Lennox Lewis, Holyfield invested $2.3 million in Real Deal Records. The record label went nowhere, becoming the first in what would be a catastrophic series of financial decisions from which he would never recover. A failed restaurant venture cost him an estimated $7.6 million. Other products bearing his name, a kitchen grill, barbecue sauce, even a line of fire extinguishers, all flopped, returning no profit whatsoever. The biggest financial catastrophe, however, came from Holyfield's decision to become a majority investor in the Black Family Channel, a television venture by former Atlanta attorney Willie Gary. Holyfield lost approximately $50 million in that single failed business deal. That pretty much crushed him, one friend would later say. That's how $250 million in boxing purses evaporates. Money that had seemed infinite during his championship years disappeared, as if it had never existed. The lawsuits piled up like body shots in the later rounds of a grueling fight. A Utah consulting company filed a federal lawsuit seeking repayment of $550,000 in loans, allegedly made to Holyfield in late 2006 and early 2007, to pay for landscaping on his massive estate. The case claimed that Robert Hall met Holyfield through a mutual friend and agreed to the loan with the understanding it would be repaid with interest after the boxer's next bout. Payment never came. By June 2012, Holyfield was evicted from the mansion. He owed the bank more than $14 million in mortgage payments. The home was sold in a foreclosure agreement for $7.5 million, a figure nowhere near what was owed, and a fraction of the property's estimated $20 million value. The mansion eventually ended up in the hands of rapper Rick Ross, who purchased it from the bank for $5.8 million. The street address, 794 Evander Holyfield Highway, served as a permanent reminder of the champion who once lived there and lost everything. In 2012, Holyfield was declared bankrupt. The humiliation was complete when he was forced to auction off nearly all of his possessions in what Julian Auctions described as the largest auction of sporting memorabilia by a single person at that time. The items up for sale represented the physical evidence of one of boxing's greatest careers. Holyfield's 1984 Olympic bronze medal, his 1983 Pan Am Games silver medal, over 20 pairs of fight-worn gloves, including the gloves from the infamous Bite Fight against Mike Tyson in June 1997, more than 25 framed fight-worn robes and trunks, championship rings commemorating his status as undisputed heavyweight champion, two-time champion, three-time champion, and four-time champion. The auction preview screamed of desperation. These weren't items a retired champion chose to sell for profit or to pass on to collectors. These were the last possessions of value that could be liquidated to satisfy debts, to attempt to dig out from under a mountain of financial obligations that had grown too large to manage. Holyfield later told reporters that the bankruptcy forced him to sell everything but his soul. The financial collapse forced Holyfield to continue fighting long past the point when he should have retired. His final professional bout came in May 2011, a win over Brian Nielsen in Copenhagen, Denmark. Holyfield was 48 years old, stopping the 46-year-old Nielsen in the 10th round of what many described as an ugly event. Nielsen was coming off a 9-year layoff and was badly out of shape. The fight provided no glory, only a paycheck for a champion who desperately needed money. Holyfield had fought professionally for 27 years, compiling a record of 44 wins against 10 losses and 2 draws across 57 total fights. The damage accrued over nearly 3 decades in the ring was substantial. During training camp for the Nielsen fight, Holyfield's sparring partner kept beating him to the punch. "I couldn't even get mad at him," Holyfield admitted. That's when the reality set in. The reflexes were gone. The timing was off. The skills that had made him one of the greatest fighters in history had eroded. He quietly decided in camp that it would be his last time in the ring, finally letting go of his fantasy of retiring as undisputed champion. "No regrets," he said. "I quit at the right time." But that wasn't the end of Holyfield's time in combat sports. In September 2021, at 58 years old, just weeks away from his 59th birthday, Holyfield accepted a fight against former UFC champion Evander Belfort as part of a Triller Fight Club pay-per-view event. The bout was originally supposed to feature Oscar De La Hoya against Belfort, but when De La Hoya contracted COVID-19, Holyfield stepped in on 6 days' notice. The California State Athletic Commission refused to license Holyfield, citing concerns about his age and ability to safely compete. The entire event was moved to Florida, where the commission proved more forgiving. The fight took place at the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino in Hollywood, Florida, with former President Donald Trump watching from the commentary booth. What transpired was difficult to watch. Belfort, 44 years old and a decorated MMA fighter with devastating hand speed, swarmed Holyfield from the opening bell. Holyfield looked physically fit standing in the ring, but once the action began, it became immediately apparent that this was not a competitive matchup. Holyfield was unsteady on his feet, unable to mount any meaningful defense. A flurry of punches sent Holyfield to the canvas. After he beat the count, Belfort continued his assault until the referee mercifully stopped the fight at 1:49 of the first round. Trump, addressing the crowd in a brief post-fight speech, seemed surprised by what he'd witnessed. "I've been with Evander a long time, and I've never seen that happen to him. It's just one of those things," he said. Holyfield, in his post-fight interview, argued that the knockdown was more the result of a push than a clean punch and claimed he wasn't hurt. He also stated that he wanted to fight again and was still interested in a rematch with Mike Tyson. The reaction from the boxing community was largely negative. Many felt the fight should never have been sanctioned, that allowing a 58-year-old man who hadn't competed in a decade to face a capable fighter was irresponsible and dangerous. CBS Sports noted that any state commission that would have allowed Holyfield to box a capable slugger with such a decorated history and performance-enhancing drug issues like Belfort is criminal. ESPN's Mark Raimondi wrote that the event crossed the line, acknowledging that novelty boxing matches had been entertaining over the past year, but that Holyfield versus Belfort represented something different, something darker. "At some point, someone needs to step in and advise against it," Raimondi wrote. "No one wants to tell a grown man he cannot make a living, but boxing is not a game. There are real, lasting ramifications." The motivation for taking the fight at such an advanced age was obvious. "It's kind of hard to turn down a big sum of something when you know you can do it," Holyfield said in the days leading up to the bout. The financial pressure that had defined his post-retirement life was still present, still pushing him to make decisions that compromised his health and dignity. The California Commission Executive Officer Andy Foster had expressed concerns about Holyfield based on regulatory factors and the lack of adequate time for an extensive licensing process. Those concerns proved well-founded. Holyfield's story is particularly tragic when considered against the backdrop of his accomplishments. He was one of only 2 men in boxing history, alongside Alexander Usyk, to become undisputed world champion in both the heavyweight and cruiserweight divisions. His career earnings surpassed $230 million, including a reported $34 million for the second Tyson fight in 1997, the bite fight that ended with Tyson being disqualified for biting off a chunk of Holyfield's ear. At the time, it was the richest fight in boxing history. He had defeated the best fighters of his generation: Mike Tyson, George Foreman, Larry Holmes, Riddick Bowe, Michael Moorer, Dwight Muhammad Qawi. The Tatsi 1996 upset victory over Tyson, when Holyfield stopped the heavily favored baddest man on the planet in the 11th round, was named Fight of the Year and Upset of the Year by Ring magazine. Holyfield's mother, Annie, who had passed away months before the fight, had prophesied the victory. "He'll be the easy fight," she told Evander long before the bout was signed. When Holyfield expressed skepticism, noting that Tyson was knocking everyone out, Annie remained confident. Her son proved her right, exposing Tyson's vulnerabilities and establishing himself as the true heavyweight king. Annie Holyfield wasn't just Evander's mother, she was the strongest influence in his life, the only person he ever feared. She demanded good conduct in school, high character in life, kindness, and forgiveness. Holyfield could still hear her voice years after her passing. "Pay attention," she would say, words that resonated through every decision, every mistake, every triumph and disaster. In his post-boxing life, as he traveled the world giving speeches and talking to his children about success and failure, having become an expert at both extremes, Annie's teachings remained central. Work hard, be responsible, own up to mistakes. The 3 divorces certainly contributed to the financial devastation. Bad investments, the child support for 11 children that at one time cost him up to $500,000 annually, the failed business ventures, the mansion he couldn't afford to maintain. All of it combined to create a perfect storm of financial ruin. Those close to Holyfield described him as trusting to a fault. "He thinks everyone is as trustworthy as he is," said his manager Ken Gaynor. That's the shame of it. Holyfield had broken with many of his past associates over the years. His longtime personal lawyer, Jim Thomas, parted ways with him in 2003 after advising the fighter to end his boxing career. "He doesn't want people around him who don't believe in what he's doing," Gaynor explained. But what Holyfield was doing, continuing to fight well past his prime, was driven not by passion or competitive fire, but by financial necessity. In October 2007, he was paid $1 million to fight Russian Sultan Ibragimov in Moscow for the WBO heavyweight title. Holyfield lost a unanimous decision in 12 rounds. The purse barely made a dent in his mounting debts. Many considered Holyfield unlucky not to have gotten the judge's verdict against Nikolai Valuev when challenging for the WBA heavyweight championship in December 2008. Holyfield was 46 years and 62 days old at the time. Had he won, he would have become the oldest heavyweight champion in history. But he lost a controversial decision, and with it, any remaining hope of securing the kind of payday that might have stabilized his finances. The pattern of financial catastrophe among boxing's greatest champions is depressingly familiar. Joe Louis kept fighting well past his prime, trying to pay off a crushing tax debt. Sugar Ray Robinson admitted he was broke by the time his long career ended. Muhammad Ali faced his own financial challenges. Mike Tyson squandered most of the vast fortune he accumulated during a career that included 2 memorable fights with Holyfield, declaring bankruptcy despite earning hundreds of millions of dollars. Holyfield's apparent financial problems fit perfectly into this historical lineage, another cautionary tale in a sport littered with them. By January 2024, Holyfield's estimated net worth stood at approximately $1 million, a shockingly small figure for someone who had earned $230 million over the course of his career. The lack of prudent financial management, the lavish spending, the failed business ventures, and the massive child support payments had all contributed to the deterioration of his wealth. From the heights of being one of the most respected and highest-paid athletes in the world to auctioning off his Olympic medal and championship belts, the arc of Holyfield's post-career life represented one of the sport's most dramatic falls. In 2023, Holyfield offered a new explanation for the mansion debacle, claiming in an interview with Vlad TV that his sister had illegally taken out a second mortgage on the property. Whether this claim represented the truth or an attempt to shift blame for financial mismanagement remained unclear. What was undeniable was the reality of the foreclosure, the bankruptcy, the auction, the desperate fights at an age when most men are enjoying retirement. Holyfield insisted that he was not broke, just not liquid, a distinction that seemed to matter little when faced with foreclosure notices and child support contempt hearings. I do feel kind of sad, because things have always been positive, and now everybody wants to jump on me like I'm the worst person in the world, and I went out and blew all my money, he told the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. But the evidence suggested that whether through malice ignorance, or misplaced trust, the money had indeed been blown. The mansion on Evander Holyfield Highway stood as a monument to both achievement and excess, to the heights a poor kid from Georgia could reach through determination and boxing talent, and to the depths that awaited when the careful stewardship of wealth was absent. Holyfield said he built the massive home because he wanted a better life for his kids, a noble intention that resulted in one of the primary instruments of his financial destruction. Now, years removed from his prime, Holyfield's legacy exists in two parallel narratives. There's the sporting legacy, the warrior who defeated Mike Tyson, who unified the heavyweight division, who competed at the highest level across multiple weight classes, who earned induction into the International Boxing Hall of Fame in 2017. And then there's the cautionary tale, the champion who earned $250 million and lost it all, who fought past the point of dignity out of financial desperation, who stood in the ring at 58 years old getting knocked out in less than 2 minutes because he needed the money. The final image of Holyfield's fighting career wasn't the triumphant champion with his hands raised in victory, but rather an old man, unsteady on his feet, unable to defend himself against a younger, stronger opponent, saved from further punishment only by a referee's intervention. It was the kind of ending that boxing has seen too many times before, the kind that makes observers wonder whether the sport's greatest warriors are protected from themselves when the money runs out and the bills keep coming. Evander Holyfield's tragic fate serves as a stark reminder that financial literacy and proper management are as crucial as any skill learned in the gym. All the championship belts in the world, all the glory and recognition, all the millions earned in the ring mean nothing when they're not protected and preserved. The real deal became a cautionary tale, a symbol of how quickly fortune can turn to ruin when spending outpaces earning, when trust is misplaced, and when the word no is never spoken. The street still bears his name, a permanent marker of past glory. But the mansion belongs to someone else now. The memorabilia has been auctioned off, and the champion who once seemed invincible has been reduced to making comeback attempts in his late 50s, chasing paydays rather than championships. It's a fate no one would have predicted during Holyfield's prime, when he stood atop the boxing world and seemed immune to the financial disasters that had befallen so many champions before him. But as Holyfield himself discovered, the hardest opponent to defeat isn't found in the ring. It's the one that waits outside it, in the form of mortgages, child support payments, failed investments, and the relentless mathematics of unsustainable spending.